What is up, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of Thinking It Through with Nate. I am Nate, your host. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about lower hour work weeks and how there seems to be some kind of movement in that direction lately. You may have seen articles popping up about places going to 4-hour work weeks. A lot of places overseas are doing that. Even some companies in the US are privately deciding to go to 4-hour work weeks. So I'm just going to talk about a little bit of the movement behind that, why that's happening, and why I fully support that and think it's a fantastic idea, and how the stats actually back that up. And then I also want to just dive into a little bit of, what's going to happen after we do that, and what are we moving towards? What does this movement ultimately mean? So let's go ahead and get into it. So there is a movement towards 4-day work weeks, which again I think is awesome. Essentially, what places are seeing is there's been a plethora of studies and data that have come out that show that when people only have 4-day work weeks, and just to be clear, this is 4-day, still 8-hour shift work weeks, not 4-day, 10-hour shifts where it's still 40 hours a week, but only 4 days. So they're taking a full day off, and they're compensating their employees equally as if they would have worked 40 hours. Now they only work 32 hours a week, but their pay rate is higher, so it's the same amount that you're getting in each paycheck. And the reason that companies feel okay doing this, you may be thinking like, well, isn't that just causing the companies to lose money? Isn't that decreasing productivity? And the answer is actually no. Productivity is actually increasing when people only have 4-day work weeks. And I think the reason behind this is pretty simple. It's basic psychological tiredness. So when you get to Friday, I don't know about you guys, but I've been super unproductive on Fridays because I've been working throughout the week and have been, you already have 32 hours on your slate. You're just looking forward to the weekend. You're exhausted, and personally, I think that at that point you are overworked. And that is why when people only work 4-day work weeks, they're actually getting more done because they're looking forward to a 3 days off. They appreciate that their company is doing that for them or that their country is doing that for them. And within those 4 days, you have peak performance still available. Obviously, the further in the week, your productivity is going to slightly decrease, you're still able to keep a good amount of productivity within those 4 days. Why is this coming up now? Where is this coming from? Well, I think that people have felt overworked for a really long time. I feel like we've kind of understood that the necessity of 5 days is just kind of a social standard at this point. There's no real reason behind it. Back when 40-hour work weeks were officially kind of established, the idea was kind of the same thing, that people were working like 60-hour work weeks, and they really wanted people to be super productive, and they found that by decreasing that, people were able to be more productive within that shorter amount of time. It's kind of like the working smarter, not working harder idea. So what society right now, I think, is trying to find is, where is that perfect balance between time spent and productivity output? And we're moving towards that being 4 8-hour days. Personally, I am a little bit more ambitious on that. I think it should be 4 6-hour days, or maybe even 3 8-hour days, or something like that. To me, that seems about right for peak productivity, and just not getting worn out. And I also personally think that the way that we've set up work in our society, work is not always meaningful. It's just a way to pay the bills. And so I think we should have more time to spend on something that we find meaningful and that are passionate about. And the way that I see that, in other words, is the true value that you have to offer to society. That's always going to come from time that you're not at a job. When it comes to work, I kind of have a different definition of work that I like to use. I often like to say that work is what your true value that you're bringing to society is. It's your passion. It's something that you can do and not get tired doing. Something that you feel happy to wake up every day and work on. Something that doesn't bother you to put in, everything you have to make something successful or to bring your vision to reality. I think that is true work. But right now, most people don't have true work. We have jobs. And I think that's a problem, and I think that eventually we're going to move away from that, especially when the automation wave comes in full force. A lot of people are kind of going to be forced away from jobs, and of course we need to figure out how to make people economically stable during that transition period and even after that. But I do still think that that's ideal. I don't think that anybody, especially, growing up, thinks, I want to be a factory worker my whole life, or, I want to drive trucks across the country my whole life. Like, that's not, if you asked any kid, like, what's your number one dream, that wouldn't be what they say. And so I think that's what we're aiming towards, is we want to, or at least what the vision that I want to see realized is for kids to come up being taught that their passion is important and having personalized education to encourage what their passion and interests are, so that by the time they're adults, by the time maybe they're in their 30s and have started their careers and all that kind of stuff, that they have something really unique and valuable to offer to society. So that's kind of a little bit of background as to why I see why this is coming up now and where it's going to go a little bit. So another thing that I want to bring up is there was a great, it's kind of getting well known, especially as this conversation goes around, and it was a quote by John Maynard Keynes. He was an economist. I think he died in like the mid-40s or something like that, 1940s. So he made a prediction, around that time, that he thought that by, I think it was either, nowadays or, 90s, 80s, something like that, that he predicted that we'd have 15-hour work weeks because of how productive we were being. We were getting so good at being productive and producing so much that there would be less of a need to work all the time because we could get just as much done in a shorter amount of time. Unfortunately, that's not what we saw. What we saw now is that we continue to try to keep up those productivity numbers and still keep up the same amount of time, so that we were exponentially producing. And that is part of what has made America, it's part of what has brought us to be the kind of dominant economic force in the world. But also part of that was just kind of the big five tech companies. I mean, if it weren't for, the big five, our GDP would be nowhere near as large as it is now. And that's definitely true for other countries as well, especially like countries like China, who their GDP is ramping up and looking like they may actually catch us. It's tech, tech is a big deal, but aside from just GDP numbers, people are also very productive in all sorts of ways at their jobs now, whether it be warehouse jobs or whatever. I mean, logistical insights and all that kind of stuff have definitely benefited us and becoming more productive. But I bring this quote up because I think that it's important to show that, like, even people back then were thinking, like, we're supposed to be working towards a better life. Like, the whole entire point of trying to improve things in society is so that the next few generations will have better lives. And unfortunately, what we've seen is that by sticking to the productivity model, like just increasing productivity as much as possible, it's making life pretty miserable. And, you have to work your entire life just so you can maybe retire with a decent fund and relax by the time you're 65. And that's just not ideal. I think there should be time to relax for everybody. I think there should be time to vacation and go do recreational things for everybody. And so it's kind of disappointing that we've reached this point in society where we are so productive and we have this, this abundance of resources where everybody could have their basic needs met and more. Yet we're still sitting here, like, suffering the majority of our lives, just working pretty much for no reason. And so I think there is a huge reckoning and a reflection on that state of things right now. It's like, I remember around the time when I was graduating high school, one of the big things that was going around was just this discussion about how, like if we really are supposed to be providing for the later generations, like, that's great, that inspires your work, but what about what the previous generation provided for us? When do we get to enjoy that? When do we get to enjoy the world that's been built for us? and there's not much time to do that in a 40-hour work week, or especially people who are working overtime, and then you add in commute times on top of that. You add in, all the chores that you have to do on your time off, which most people will tell you, like, you work a 40-hour work week, then you spend your weekend doing everything else that you missed out on during that 40-hour work week to, like, just make sure you're good and caught up and staying level and not falling behind on things. And then you go right back to work on Monday, and that's just not an ideal way to live, I don't think. So I'm really excited about this trend towards lower hour work weeks, because that gives us more time to do the things that are truly meaningful, and again, to experience the benefits that the previous generations, a lot of the people in the previous generations, worked so hard to give us. So now the next thing that I wanted to talk about is what is standing in the way of this becoming the complete standard for everybody in America right now. Obviously, there's social norms and standards, and this stuck mentality of a lot of bosses right now that, no, we need people here 5 days a week to be as productive as possible, and we got to serve the bottom line for the company, and all this like really toxic mentality about how business should work. But aside from that, which I think is kind of more of an obvious answer, logistically speaking, things like retail and service-based jobs, and even warehouse-based jobs and stuff like that, those are presence-based. Those are not necessarily productivity-based, right? So you are being paid to be there for that amount of hours because you are producing the same thing no matter when you're there. If you're doing like a warehouse job or something like that, like, you're picking up boxes and you're bringing them to the next place, and you can do that 5 days a week with a decent amount of like level productivity. And if you don't have people doing that 5 days a week, it slows down the supply chain. Someone like Amazon would be appalled to, change to 4-hour work weeks for their whole workforce, because, it wouldn't allow them to stay on their logistical model and to make sure they get 2-day shipping all the time. So those are the kind of things that are kind of standing in the way. And I've mentioned warehouse jobs a lot, but this is also like applicable to people who work, food jobs, like fast food jobs, or are waiters or waitresses, or people who work in like retail. Like if you work at a store as a cashier or something, your productivity doesn't change if you are there 4 versus 5 days a week. What this is really applicable to is people who work on a computer all day long, people who are crunching numbers or creating projects or presentations and all that kind of stuff. Like, those kind of jobs definitely do experience that increase in productivity if you reduce the hours of the work week, because people aren't getting so mentally drained. But with things that don't have personal quotas that you're meeting, that definitely changes. And so what's really standing in the way is the existence of these jobs, which that's not going to change anytime soon. What really will change that is the automation wave. And once that automation wave comes, then we'll be a lot more able to either reduce those workers' work hours, or they won't have those kind of jobs available to them anymore. And then we'll see the entire workforce move to a 4-day work week. So that's kind of what's standing in the way. Now, I want to talk a little bit about why I think this is still ideal. I just mentioned that all these people are likely going to lose their jobs, or at least people who would go to jobs like that won't even have those opportunities. It sounds like a really scary thing, and especially if you are used to the Overton window and talking points of probably the past few decades of like, jobs are good, losing jobs is bad. And that has been mainly true because a job provides a living wage, or at least it should. And if you can't get money, then how are you supposed to get the resources you need and have your basic needs met? And that's why I'm a huge proponent of universal basic income. I think we should have it anyway, but it's definitely going to be like the only thing that will help us deal with the automation wave. Now, a lot of people say that every time we have an automation wave, a new technology that's created to make jobs easier, make certain jobs just that they aren't needed anymore for people to do them. People in the past have said, oh no, we're going to run out of jobs, what are we going to do? And jobs always come. But the automation wave is different to me because I think that the whole point of the automation wave is to automate any job that you can. So regardless of new jobs come up that are required to maintain automation, we will likely automate those jobs as well. So it's a feedback loop that's going to be created with the new technology that's coming out, and that's why this wave is going to be different than all of the other ones. There will be new positions that arise from the automation wave, but it's not going to come from the need to maintain the automation. It's going to come from a new shift in society of it's the next evolution of what our society should do. So, the further that society gets set up, there's new requirements and there's new characteristics that define this generation or this evolution of society. And I think the automation, along with people having more free time, is going to be the defining trait of the next wave of society. And I think that's great. That sounds super ideal to me. I'd love to have more free time. I'd love to be able to focus on passion projects, and I'm trying to do that right now, but I'd love for everybody to be able to do that. And so once society becomes stable and everyone's basic needs are met, that's going to open the door to, looking forward. And once we look forward, there's going to be rapid development of new technologies, rapid development of new ideas, consumer products that make our lives better. But there's also going to be a huge shift to more of a strong focus on the arts. That kind of matches up with entertainment, like we have more time that we want to be entertained during that extra time that we have. But it's not just entertainment. It's also, I think there's two sides to this. There's you create and then you can consume. And, for people who are more artistic, they're going to be spending a lot more of their time creating, which I think is extremely valuable. And then when you put that out there, art helps move our social perspectives forward. It helps move our ideas on the economy forward and stuff like that. So I think we're just going to hit this point where when we have so many people free to focus on creation, whether that be art or whether that be engineering type stuff, then that, inventions and all that kind of stuff, then we are going to be seeing a huge boom and evolution of our society to this next wave. And I can't even fathom what that's going to look like. Like the exponential increase that we're going to have in new ideas and evolution and advancement of society on every scale is just you can't understand what that would be like. But I think it's going to be incredible, and I think that's what we should be looking towards is more freedom for society, for the community, and for the individual. I think that is super, super essential. So, I'm really excited to see that happen, again, because I think that is human nature. I think that is what our minds, our conscious minds, are geared towards when we aren't spending time just making sure our basic needs are met. And currently in society, we've reached this really weird point where a job provides for our needs, but that job has nothing to do with the needs that we're meeting. If you think back to hunter-gatherer times, or even beginning society days with basic agriculture and stuff like that, everyone had a job that was really essential to making sure that your needs were met. There was the hunters, there was the gatherers, making sure you have food. Maybe you had a builder who would build their house and maybe help other people build their homes. But everything that you were doing directly played a role in meeting one of your basic needs, if not more than one. But nowadays, the job, the work that we put in day-to-day life, has nothing to do with our survival, right? So somebody can go to a factory making stupid little $1 plastic toys that people buy for birthday parties and throw away the next day that you go buy at the dollar store or something. And that obviously has nothing to do with making sure that you can go home and have a roof over your head and have warmth and have water and have food and be able to buy clothing and transportation and all these things. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's so arbitrary. And I think that's why, part of that, I think, is why we're seeing an increase in mental health decline, or I guess a decline in mental health in our society, is because we can't understand. There's just something like innate in our minds that wants to work on something that actually matters, and when we're sitting there working on something that clearly doesn't matter, it gets to us. And I think that this shift in lower hour work weeks is going to be the first minor step in working to get away from that. And I think there's going to be a huge reorganization of values and a reprioritization of those things. Sustainability is going to be one of those things where I personally hope that all of those factories that produce $1 toys shut down and end and go out of business. That's not sustainable for our society. It's creating a massive trash problem. I think that eventually people who work there are going to realize that this doesn't give me meaning or purpose, and we really need that, and we really need meaning and purpose. So I think that eventually we're going to move away from that kind of stuff, and we're going to see a reorganization in values towards more things that actually do have meaning and purpose. And interestingly, maybe they're not going to connect to serving our basic needs, but they're going to connect to serving higher needs, to become fully self-realized and to express and to create and invent and those kind of things. I think, those roles are within all of us. We all have one of those roles, to be either creative, inventive, to solve problems, or even to... there's some people who just, like to be of service in whatever kind of way that they can, and we're going to see an emergence of community roles coming out of that again, which I think is going to be super essential. So what I'm hoping that again is that this is the first step to that reorganization of values, to shifting the way that society functions at large. It has to happen if we want to continue. And so I'm hopeful that it will happen. And I do think that this is the first step, and I think a lot of people are realizing this. And, one of the things that happened during the COVID pandemic, right when it hit, this was one of the things I immediately became hopeful of, was that people are going to have extra time because they're all sitting at home and can't go out. And they're going to realize that, what am I spending my time on? What do I want to spend my time on, rather than just being stuck in I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, the survival mentality that's artificially produced. Because again, we're in a time of abundance. Everybody's needs could be met, but we have this stupid idea that we all have to get a job, which literally means nothing, just to live. And I think that just by the simple reflection that people were able to have during the pandemic, I think that is going to be the start to this big shift. We're already seeing it kind of happen with people demanding higher wages and refusing to work for, pre-pandemic wages, because we realize that, workers actually do have the power. We are the masses. And so, when we collectively get together and we have the mass resignation, we actually hold all the power right now, and we can continue to do that until we set up society in a way that works for all of us. And it's not just the form of workers, but it's going to come in, a political movement and all of that kind of stuff as well. But again, I'm just hopeful that the time that people had to reflect on that is going to change things, and I think it already has. But yeah, that was one of the things that when the pandemic hit, I was like, this is one good thing that we can take from this, and I think that will come out of this, is that people are going to realize that we can reorganize our society, and that we should reorganize our individual lives. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about today. Thanks for watching, guys. I always appreciate it. If you are interested in coming on the podcast and having a discussion about any of the topics I've already talked about, or you have a topic in mind, or you follow me on social media somewhere else and you've seen me talk about a topic that you'd like to engage with me in, please reach out to me. I'm happy to do in-person podcast meetings with people who are in my area, or we can do a Zoom meeting or something like that to just have a discussion. I'd really like to kind of broaden this podcast from just me talking to also having conversations with people. So definitely reach out to me. You can leave a comment below, or reach out to me, through my contact info. Down below, my Patreon link is always going to be there. So if you can, just donate $5 a month, $8 a month, $2 a month, anything like that is going to be super helpful for me to get, to to get this off and running, and to get the podcast just going well, and helping me to be able to focus on this more and make this like a part-time gig for myself, which is something that I really want to do. So I hope that you found these topics to be useful so far. I'm going to continue to do this and get hopefully 2 episodes up every week as far as I can. I'm a little bit late on this one because I got injured and just been resting, but I'm going to keep doing my best to get these up for you guys. So again, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell, as that helps the YouTube algorithm a lot. And if you're listening in audio only, I also really appreciate that. If you're watching on YouTube, you can grab the audio only RSS link down below. Once you go to the audio-only version, you can actually grab that RSS link and put it into any podcast source that you use, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can put it on all of them. So whatever works for you, I'm trying to make this extremely accessible. So again, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.